Hey Monograph, Hell's Unicorn here, responding to your little video regarding the recent turn of events. I read all the links that you provided with me, and to be honest with you, the only thing that surprises me about this is how little the world has changed in the past 100 years, and in particular this country. The question that you pose is a rather interesting one because I've given it a good deal of thought. Who would I vote for if Ron Paul was eliminated from the race? And if he was eliminated, there'd really be only one way they'd do it. They'd use force to either convince him to leave the race, such as maybe a failed assassination attempt to try and scare him, or they might just go all out and kill him, which they've done in the past. Who is the they? That's an interesting question also. It's a number of different people. Those who know already know and don't need to have it explained to, and those who don't know should really look somewhere else for information, because there is a process for becoming acquainted with this stuff, and you won't find it on this video. Who would I vote for if Ron Paul was removed from the election? The question's not who I would vote for so much as what I would vote for. And what I would vote for is the same thing that I've always voted for, whether there's an election or not. And that's liberty. Problem is, for most people, is that they don't understand what liberty is. Most see it as something that pretty much comes natural. It's innate. It's a general tendency of a person to want to be free, to do what they wish with their own lives. But in reality, it's a little bit more complicated than that. It's a struggle against others, surprisingly enough. A lot of idealistic thinkers out there would argue that this is not the case, but let's face it, we're not free. And we haven't been for a very long time. We had it for a short while, and then immediately the outside world started to force its way back in with the abomination known as centralized banking. Unfortunately, we didn't heed Thomas Jefferson's word on that, and we adopted it 3 times. First 2 times it was only successful for a limited amount of time before being destroyed, but the 3rd time it got a foothold. And now it's here basically to stay. The interesting thing, and most people don't know this, is that the Federal Reserve Bank exists not through law per se, but by contract, a contract that was made law. And that contract has to be renewed every 50 years. The Federal Reserve Bank was given this power that it now has in the year 1913 by the great idiot Woodrow Wilson and a bunch of willing cohorts in both houses of Congress. Its first renewal was in 1963. And as we all know, the person who was president at the time was John F. Kennedy. Now, people have often speculated, how did Kennedy get put into this race if all of this, and put into the presidency if all this stuff about the Federal Reserve Bank and the Council on Foreign Relations and all these other groups with all these elites in it were actually controlling the media, because he was something of a media darling. The truth is that I think the media saw him as a patsy, and the perfect way to maintain the seesaw effect of the two-party system. We had already had 8 years of a Republican. Now it's time for a Democrat. Now, of course, when you place a patsy into power, you come to the possibility that the person that you put into power turns out to not be the patsy that you thought they were. They start digging around, and they find things, and they decide to act upon those things, conforming to their own standards of morality. And Kennedy, like me, is a convicted Catholic who frowns upon such things as killing people in other countries for economic gain, for starters, and also to the concept of usury, which is the very basis of the Federal Reserve Bank. So we come to 1963. The contract is up for renewal. There is a pretty good chance, based on Kennedy's speeches, that he is not going to reauthorize that contract. Thus, the Federal Reserve System goes away, and we go back to the de facto constitutional system with regards to money. It's controlled by Congress, and there is full disclosure. So what happens? Kennedy winds up dead, and one of the first things that happens when good old LBJ assumes office is that the contract with the Federal Reserve is renewed. And 50 more years of economic hell, volatility, and whatever adjectives you can come up with to describe it, continue. We're coming up on the year 2013, and it's a pretty safe bet, based upon historical trends, that whoever is elected next will be either perceived as being different or actually be different than the current president. So we either get a Democrat who's part of the establishment but fools the people into thinking he's not, or we get Ron Paul. And the odds are that that person is going to get reelected, barring some catastrophic events that can be blamed on the incumbent. So the re-election takes us from 2012 to 2016. And the date of the next required renewal of the Federal Reserve contract is in that time span, 2013. With Ron Paul as president, you can rest assured that that contract's not going to be renewed. A lot of people look at this and they probably see coincidence, but me, being of the theological persuasion that I am, I see providence. But regardless to what you see, what you should take from it is an opportunity. And the opportunity is to erase this ever-growing and ever-mounting threat against our liberty that is the Federal Reserve Bank. It's basically an opportunity to be rid of it without the need of a lengthy law passed through Congress, which is loaded with shills for the same establishment that controls the banking system. All we need to do is get Paul elected and keep him alive for 5 years. The latter is probably going to be more difficult than the former, but it can be done. We faced invasion from outside countries, particularly in the case of England, and we were able to maintain our government in a system that was largely more militia-based and people-run than what we have now. So it is possible. So, getting back to the initial point, what happens if Paul is assassinated? Well, we do what we ought to do no matter what happens. We keep fighting. We run for office, we find other people to run for office, and we take this government back. This isn't just about Ron Paul. This is about the whole country. People ask, who is Ron Paul? I'll tell you who he is. He's you, and he's me, and he's everyone else out there in this country that hungers for the return to liberty. He's not the cult of personality that are these shills that the establishment puts up for us. He's just a man, like the rest of us. And all men, and all women for that matter, can aspire to great things with the proper motivation and with the will to act. So, if Paul dies, this doesn't end. This is above and beyond even Ron Paul. This is all of us. And that's how we need to approach this. So no matter what happens to him, we keep going. They may be able to kill him, but they can't kill all of us. Not without looking extremely bad and basically blowing their hand. So, anyway, Just general food for thought for all of you. Take from it what you will. With prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.